Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Spiritualized 1992 album called Lazer Guided Melodies. Um, this is a really good album to listen to as far as like nice and pleasant, nice to drift off to, maybe even trip out to. It's kind of definitely got that kind of a little bit of a hippie sound. Um, in some ways, it sort of predates dream pop. In some ways, it's kind of indie, really good. I think space rock is like the perfect genre title for this album. But there's certainly a little bit of psychedelic in here, a little bit of pop, a little bit of hippiness in it. I think overall in the album, I think the album is better than the sum of the parts. For me, I think overall it's a really good album. Um, versus going to any one particular songs, although you certainly can. I really like the guitars, the effects has a nice kind of spacey sound. There's some good use of stereo spectrum in here, with like with the track "If I Were With Her Now" and "Sway," for example. Those are good examples. They don't overdo the effects, which I think is really key in this type of album. Nothing's like overly done. Um, it kind of reminds me of Moon Safari by Air, in not the way it sounds to the songs, but it's just as far as the influence on maybe other genres or its place in history of music, as far as sort of being ahead of the time. Maybe that's sort of because of space rock. The space rock sort of title. It reminds me of sort of Space Lounge with like Air. Air has a little bit more of a Moog sound and more of a '70s sound and maybe but still kind of spacey and a little bit of rock, although it's a little bit more loungy, right? Where this is a good example of space rock, but it just kind of reminds me of Moon Safari. As far as the impact, maybe on other bands and what it's kind of done for being way ahead of the curve, being a little ahead of the time with the style of music is and what it influenced. I got a chance to see Spiritualized live in 1995 when they opened up for Susie and the Banshees, and that was my first experience with them. I didn't know this album. I didn't buy this album until maybe about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago or so. Um, so I didn't know. I knew of them because I saw them, but this is the only album I own by them. So I'm looking forward to rating some of their other albums as well and kind of continue the journey. That's one of the good things about doing these videos is I can kind of go back to some pockets and pockets of albums and styles and bands that I didn't fully check out the rest of their catalog. But I'll certainly be doing it with the Spiritualized and doing the review. I definitely wanted to include this in my week of reviews on dream pop and indie pop and shoegaze and space rock in general. So I'm glad to add this to it because it'll definitely make me want to go into some of their albums. But it almost has like a symphonic rock to this album as well too. I think the band, they do a good job of playing off each other. Good timing between the band members. Um, Looking at my notes here, solid use of other instruments as well. Nice production overall. Good layering. It's almost like a progressive indie rock in a way, but space rock is still a good term for this. Cool artwork. When I think of the opportunities of the album, 61 minutes, 12 tracks. It's a little long, but I get it. This is a more in-depth album, so it's not more poppy. So it's still fine, but I I think there is a little bit of an opportunity. I don't know how you feel about this album if you know this album really well, but I feel like the track listing order could be a little different. and be a little bit better. Um, I feel like it's very heavy in the um, back half of the album. Like 6 and 7, Step into Breeze and Symphony Space are sort of like the breaks for the album, right? And really, even Smiles breaks the album as far as being an instrumental, but it's track 5. And then tracks 8 through 12 are all kind of, in a way, kind of long, similar tracks. They're all like 5 to 7 minutes long, and so the back half of the album is very heavy. It's hard to get through the album as a whole in one listen, 61 minutes. Um, Maybe in some ways it's a little poppy at the start. Some of the more straightforward songs are at the beginning, and then it sort of goes into deeper after the break. That would make sense. But I do feel like, based on I mean, we can all say in hindsight like how to segue an album, and maybe it could have been better. But I think there could have been an opportunity here to mix up the flow a little bit. I think tracks 8 through 12 in some ways kind of sound similar to each other. Um, they're all really good tracks, don't get me wrong. It's just they're all kind of in the same vein, and they're all long tracks. Um, Looking at the tracks individually, It's True. I rated 2.25 stars. Not a bad opener. If I Were With Her Now, definitely better. I really like the bass and the constant build of this song. 3 stars. I Want You is 3.5 stars. Sounds like it should have been a big hit. This I Want You. Um, that's one track I've always stuck out from this album as far as being a pop song, and also Run as well. But I feel like I Want You could have been a big hit, but not sure why. 3.5 stars. Run. Maybe I don't like it as much as other people do, but I still think it's catchy. 2.75 stars. Smiles is a decent instrumental. I give it 2 stars. I like how it breaks up the album. I just kind of wish it would. It's a nice break in the album, but I feel like it's not in the middle of the album, and I feel like maybe Step Into the Breeze and Symphonic Space should have been before Smiles, and then break up the last 5 songs. I think it's equal on if you measured out the time. I think it'd be more balanced to do that in the middle versus put Smiles at track 5. But either way, 2 stars. I think it's a good song. Step Into the Breeze. I think this is this uses, well, I can't remember who sampled, but I like the atmosphere on this track a lot. It's a little short, 3 stars. Now I'm saying this one's too short, the other ones are too long, but it is what it is. Symphony Space. This kind of continues the same atmosphere. The flute kind of sounding thing is pretty nice in here. I don't know if it's a real flute, but 3 stars. And then the last 5 tracks is what I was saying. These are some of the better tracks I feel like, but 5 in a row of them is it's definitely drift you off to sleep on these last 5. They're all like definitely like spacey, hazy, long tracks that just unfold over a long period of time. And some of them don't do too much too as well. They're very kind of spacious and kind of minimal. Take Your Time. I put in here, you have to love how the bass line. Oh, okay, I'm being sarcastic. The bass line in this track is really good. It sort of comes out of all this like hazy intermission sound, which is really cool. The guitars are really nice too. 3.25 stars. Shine a Light is my favorite track on the album. 4 stars. It all really comes together on this song for me. The bass line, the more hook in the guitar, ending with a simple organ really kind of brings it home. 4 stars, my favorite song on here. Angel Sigh, 3.25 stars. Triumphant. The drum beat on it is kind of like a slug shot, like a gunshot. It really kind of hits. Like it's kind of like hollow sounding, but it really kind of punches a hole if you play it loud. Kind of blends the upbeat with the previous 4 tracks. This does. I like the more mellow parts for sure in this. The louder parts can be a little loud on this one, but I still think it's a really good track. 3.25 stars. 3.25 stars for Sway as well, and also 3 stars for 200 bars, the last track. Again, many of these last few songs kind of sound similar. The last song, 200 bars, is the most different in many ways. Sort of adds a beat, some sort of like keyboard sounds, and um, yeah, it's just a little bit different ending, which is nice. Maybe that one could have been put up higher in the playlist in the track listing to really kind of differentiate it, because it is a little bit more different. Because it does kind of get a little monotonous, even though they're good songs. Um, I think there's an opportunity for a different track listing on this album. I feel like it's just I'd be curious to hear what their thoughts on it, and how they put together this album. It almost feels like a double album in some ways. There's some pop ones, there's some instrumental, there's some really long songs. You know, it's really back heavy. I don't. The break in the I feel like the instrumental is sort of the break of the album, right? It's like not even really 3 minutes, but it's track 5 when there's 12 tracks, so it's not even in the middle. And then as far as timing, the first 4 tracks are probably around 17 minutes, and then after it there's roughly probably 50 minutes, 45 minutes. So it's not really right in the middle of the album. So I don't know, maybe some opportunities in there. When I add up the stars, it's a really good rating overall on the album. 3 stars exactly. 36 stars divided by 12 songs. 3.0. So it's right at a very good album of 70. I gave it a couple extra points considering, just the importance of this album, and the overall sound, and I think this type of album is an album that grows on you when you listen to it more. It's funny because as I well, not really forcing myself to listen to it all, but it's funny because I really know the first 7 tracks a lot more than the last 5 tracks, and it's because it's a long album to get through, and there's probably plenty of times I put on this album and sort of didn't get to the second half of it, and then just kind of put it away and wanted to listen to something else, and so I would do that a lot. So I know the first half of the album a lot more so than the second half of the album. And then I was going to rate these, and they're like, well, the second half of the album is actually better than the first half. So maybe I should just start it on track like 7 or 8 and just play it from now on, so I get to know the second half better. Um, but 73 out of 100 out of the album. I did have this playing devil's advocate, as I always do with my ratings, in my own head. Maybe not. I don't always say it, but sometimes I do. I pose like question marks or something like that to kind of make myself think, or make you think on why it shouldn't be or why it should be, or what have you. But one of the things that I put on here is like, because I know the importance of this record, and then like their other, I think it's Pure after this, right? And then the space, the blue album, the blue and the white, like all those 3 albums are very highly regarded by people who like Spiritualized. I know people that just love Spiritualized, and I'm excited to kind of get into more of their music. Especially after, I've never gotten around to buying their other albums. I'm kind of one of those persons who, if I don't see it at the store, I'm not going to go to YouTube and play the album and then get to know it. If I feel like there's an interest there and I want to buy the records, I'll save my first listening for when I buy it. So I don't know any of the other albums. I don't know any of the other songs on the albums, but I know this album, and so yeah, I'm excited to. But that's how I get into albums. That's how I like to listen to the album for the first time. That's how I like to experience it. I like to experience it on my own time, on my own stereo, and actually support a secondhand record store or a new record store and actually buy the music. And so eventually I just probably I've never kind of gotten around to seeing their CDs in a secondhand store. Probably because most of them, they're kind of like Depeche Mode. Is you don't see a lot of secondhand Depeche Mode in record stores for how many they sold. People hang on to them. They like them. I think that's the same thing with Spiritualized. I don't see a lot of their. I haven't come across a lot of their albums, in record stores, used anyways. Um, so yeah, 73 out of 100. But here's the question I would pose when you think of the overall importance, and I do think this album is groundbreaking for the time in many ways. 1992. I feel like it is kind of like an extension of like a rock version of like Air Moon Safari, which I love that album, and I know what that means for like electronic music for being groundbreaking. So I feel like this is kind of that way for rock music, space rock music, what have you. But I'm not sure a bunch of campfire strumming and hippie lyrics and singing and processing through a hazy effects box deserves extremely high marks for being groundbreaking, like some would say. So let me say that again, because I'm still a little half asleep because I'm tired from last night. So bear with me. Even though I've had 2 cups of coffee, that was a long sentence. So I'm not sure a bunch of campfire strumming and hippie lyrics and singing processed through a heavy effects box deserves extremely high remarks for being groundbreaking. You know, take that for what it is. You know, just kind of made me think, like, I mean, when you think about the validity of this album and the groundbreakingness of the album, it's really just kind of them strumming some guitars and doing some, and putting it through an effects box and sort of just, expanding upon it a little bit. There's not a lot of songs that kind of change. I mean, there's some that kind of go up and down, like Angel Sigh, kind of goes, more mellow and then kind of gets really loud. But there's quite a few songs that are just kind of, once they do what they're doing, they pretty much just stay in that vein, which I like minimalism in music, and I generally like when a band stays in the sweet spot more so than goes up and down and does all that stuff. Um, so I like that. I do really like this album, but when you think of like the importance of it and the how people highly regard this, is it it's almost in some ways it's kind of like overrated for in some ways because of how people rave about this album, and then you're kind of like, well, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's pretty straightforward, and it's, what I mean, it's just, is it the hazy effects is it the hazy effects and the sort of space rock? Is that what's making it legendary? Is it the songwriting? Is it his voice? If you're a huge Spiritualized fan, tell me what you think is groundbreaking about the album. Um, and I'm not. I'm just saying this devil's advocate. I'm not saying that I don't think that I think it's overrated. I'm just questioning what people say about this album and the band, and trying to put it into context of what's before it. Like I do think it is groundbreaking for 1992, space rock and stuff like that. But when you think of space rock was done in the 70s, and this sort of just takes sort of like some acoustic guitars and some guitars and sort of puts that through processing and sort of, is it that groundbreaking, or is it that, what I mean? Like what in your opinion, what makes it a great album? I guess maybe that's. I do like the balance of it, of the, you know, of the different styles. The pop and then the longer song and stuff like that. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this album. But again, very good album. I think it's really strong. Um, it it's still, in some ways, even though I've had this album for 20 years, I can't, I don't know how many times I've listened to it in full, but in some ways, it's probably still growing on me, and this is probably the start of, sort of the end of that, of it growing on me, and sort of actually have a full opinion on it, and then I'll also, when I listen to the other albums, that'll help put it in sort of a different context of what's the better spiritualized album or spiritualized music. Um, but yeah, just it's definitely an album that makes me think deeper um, about its place in history. That's I guess that's one thing I'm kind of getting at is like I'm really into history, and it was always my favorite subject in school, and I look at things that historically and how they influenced each other, and when I notice something that's or when I hear something and I feel like, okay, well, this is 1992, this is space rock. I mean, who was doing space rock in 1992, right? Not a lot of people, right? Maybe older bands that were doing space rock in the 70s were still doing it in 1992, but not a lot of new bands, right? So, like, just, so that impacts what's after it, right? How impactful or groundbreaking is when what's been done before in that genre, right? Is it tied to post punk? Where does it sit in history? Like, that all that stuff is really interesting for me, and because I really like to get to know bands on that level as far as where I can place them in the history of that genre or just in music in general. I rather like to know that stuff and the importance of things, importance of albums and music and bands, more so than even understanding the lyrics of what they're saying or things like that. Or I don't really get into too much of that. I like to, I I like to get into the historical value of an album and the merit of the album, and of course the enjoyment of the album as well. It's kind of all tied together, but that's the way I look at music. And when I don't know music, a band really well, like Spiritualized, it already has me kind of thinking of where their place in history is, and I'm excited to kind of come up with that opinion. But I'd be curious to know your opinion as well, and I'm sure I'll have more of a deeper opinion once I listen to more of their albums. And yeah, I'm excited too because I remember when I did see them in concert in 1995, I it went over my head. In 1995, I was into a lot of electronic music and not so much into space rock right then. I didn't really get into space rock type stuff and prog rock and more the ambient side of progressive or prog ambient, I suppose. But just space music in general. Excuse me, I didn't get involved into late '90s, early 2000s for the most part. Really get in depth with it, so it kind of went way over my head. I was there to see Susie and the Banshees, and I had no idea who Spiritualized was. Um, and I don't think it was the right, and that's I don't remember the band getting much reaction from the crowd either. Um, you know, it's hard for I read that with Jesus and the Mary Chain opening for Depeche Mode. There's some bills where they put bands on before and it may not be the right audience. Like, it just I don't think choosing the Banshees. Maybe some older people that are fans would appreciate, but I was only 19 at the time, so well, it was probably a little bit over my head to appreciate Spiritualized when I was there for choosing the Banshees. But yeah, it's so again that's another reason why they've always been interesting to me because there's not a lot of bands where I remember seeing them and them kind of being over my head, and then I ended up liking them later. The was one of those bands, even more so because I love the and I have all their albums. And when I saw them in '93, I knew some songs from the Dusk album when it came out in '93. I knew some of those songs, but still the other songs in general, the sound went over my head. And then as the '90s went on, I got a little older. I got Soul Mining, and then it all made sense. Um, it's funny how music does that to you. You can hear an album and it just go over your head, even though you're really into music, and then later on you hear something else by the band, or maybe it's the same album, and then it clicks, and you're like, "This is so amazing! How did I not be more into this when this came out, or how did I not be really intent on listening to Spiritualized when I saw him in concert? What a loss on my part to actually been there and been over my top of my head like I didn't understand it. But that's the great thing about music is when you learn music, you learn it at different uh, rates, and if something that you're not ready for, you hear and you're not experienced enough to understand what you're listening to, then it may pass by you, and that's why I like to be really well balanced. And you can see even on this album, I'm still not as well balanced as I could be, because I'm not fully understanding the the why people say this is an amazing album or amazing band. I feel like I do, but not fully. And because I feel like there is some opportunities on the album, but yeah, I don't know. I think the other thing is too is about this particular album is I'm more from the electronic music side, right? Appreciating rock from an electronic side. If I was rock fan and I appreciated this on a space rock, maybe that's why they understand it a little bit more so than me being electronic into this, right? That could be the only background I could see is a difference of appreciation coming from a rock band perspective, rock music background, than coming from my electronic side. Not that I don't have rock music in my early years, but I'm not. I'm more so into the electronic side. I've always been like that. So yeah, just some overall thoughts in the album, but good album overall. Really enjoy it, and again, I'm looking forward to looking more into their career and their albums. Which albums should I review next by them? By the way, all right, 73 out of 100. Appreciate it.